Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Perlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Perlman.
Hello, I'm Nancy Perlman. On this edition of Eco News, we're going to be talking about the humanitarian and social issues in the Euro-Asian region of the Caucasus Mountains and the Caspian Sea. I visited the country of Azerbaijan, and I saw quite a transformation from when I visited it when it was part of the Soviet Union. In the 30 years of independence, it went from a poor post-Soviet country to the largest economy in the region. And to talk more about all the changes in the area and some of the current conflicts that are going on in that region is my guest, Nasimi Aghayev. He is the Consul General of Azerbaijan to the Western United States and is Azerbaijan's representative, senior representative to 13 U.S. states. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. It's great to be on your show.
This is an area of the world that has beautiful natural history, incredible environment of many different ecosystems, a cultural tradition with music, song, dance, and food, and so many other kinds of aspects that make one really enjoy a visit there.
So, Azerbaijan is an ancient country in a very ancient region, but it's a relatively new republic. We've been independent since 29 years, and we were part of the Soviet Union for 71 years. But this is our second republic. The first Republic of Azerbaijan was established in 1918. Azerbaijan Democratic Republic was its name.
Short-lived.
Yes, short-lived, unfortunately, before the Bolsheviks invaded Azerbaijan and other Caucasus countries. But for 2 years, this was the first secular democracy in the entire Muslim world, and the first one actually to give voting rights to women. It's a lot of progressive history over there.
Thank you. On behalf of the
definitely.
women.
But you know, it was very important for Azerbaijanis to have this right and women emancipation. That's why it prospered in the country. But unfortunately, yes, for 71 years, Azerbaijan was part of the Soviet Union, was invaded and incorporated forcefully into this empire. But finally, we got our independence. But as you correctly mentioned, 29 years later, Azerbaijan is a strong country and is moving forward in many directions.
And I remember visiting various memorials for people who fought in different wars. And one of the recent conflicts, if we can say it's recent, it's sort of been going on for a couple of decades at least, is that over the land in a very particular area of your country between you, Azerbaijan, and your neighboring country of Armenia. Where and why?
Yeah, it's one of the painful pages in the history of Azerbaijan. The region called Karabakh, which is part of Azerbaijan, historic territory of Azerbaijan.
And it's very productive land because I think the name means black orchard.
It's black orchard, black garden. It's in Azerbaijani language, Karabakh, which is black orchard, black garden. And this was actually an area, a center of Azerbaijani culture, music, like the city of Shusha. A lot of famous Azerbaijani musicians, poets, writers, intelligentsia were actually from this city. So it has a special role in Azerbaijani culture. So we started seeing some claims by Armenia against Azerbaijan for this area, Karabakh region. And when both Azerbaijan and Armenia became independent after the collapse of the Russian Empire, the Allied forces after the World War I recognized this area as part of Azerbaijan, this Karabakh region as part of Azerbaijan, so as part of the independent Republic of Azerbaijan, our first republic. And in 1920, when Azerbaijan was invaded by Bolsheviks and we became part of the Soviet Union, still this region remained as part of Azerbaijan. under the Soviet Union for 71 years, and Armenians had a very large autonomy, self-rule within Azerbaijan as an autonomous oblast or region when we were part of the Soviet Union, enjoying all rights, all privileges there. All administrative positions were occupied by Armenians, so they had their universities, school, all the cultural opportunities, so all the opportunities to keep their identity, develop their identity, and enjoy their rights as much as it was possible within the Soviet Union, of course. But when the Soviet Union started getting, the waning days of the Soviet Union in the end of the 1980s, unfortunately we saw these unsubstantiated claims by Armenia against Azerbaijan. Again, they saw the opportunity in the weakening of Azerbaijan. So they used this opportunity to also, with the allies, let's say, outside of the region, to raise these claims against Azerbaijan, and just for the sole purpose of expanding Armenia's territory at the expense of Azerbaijan. So that was the sole purpose of these ultra-nationalist forces in Armenia that set off this very painful conflict for both countries, for both peoples. And that's how it started when Armenian armed forces invaded a large portion of Azerbaijan's sovereign territory in the early 1990s. About 20% of Azerbaijan's sovereign territory was occupied by Armenia. And the more tragically, all these areas, occupied areas, were ethnically cleansed from this area's indigenous Azerbaijani population.
Are you saying that hundreds of thousands of Azerbaijanis felt the need to leave the region because this conflict was going on, so they've become refugees in the rest of the country?
Exactly. The area, this Karabakh region, was inhabited by 800,000 Azerbaijanis. 50,000 of them were living in the upper part of the region, which is called Nagorno-Karabakh, and 750,000 of them were living in the 7 adjacent districts. And so all of these ethnic Azerbaijanis were expelled from their homes and lands, and oftentimes overnight, leaving behind everything they had. So now these people suddenly became IDPs, like internal displaced people, in their own country, living in many tent camps scattered around Azerbaijan, up until 2008, when the last tent camp was closed by the government of Azerbaijan, and all these IDPs were resettled into normal housing built by the government. But imagine the human tragedy that these people were living in their own homes and lands for centuries, and suddenly another country invades your lands and tells you that you have to leave, and expels you from your land. So it caused a lot of humanitarian catastrophe in the entire country. This pain, the pain of occupation, the pain of ethnic cleansing, and also massacres that were committed by Armenian troops against Azerbaijani civilian population, this is pretty fresh. It may be like 30 years old, but it's pretty fresh. It's pretty fresh in the memory of all those survivors, of all those people who experienced it, and the entire people of Azerbaijan.
You still have generations alive who went through it.
Exactly. And the biggest and the most horrendous crime committed by Armenian troops during this occupation against Azerbaijan civilians was this Khojaly massacre. There was a town, Khojaly, in Nagorno-Karabakh region of Azerbaijan, and this was a very strategic area of the country because it had the only airport in the entire Karabakh region. And of course, Armenia wanted to get a hold of this airport and the region, and while they were invading this important strategic town, the troops, Armenian troops, committed a very horrific massacre against the civilian population. 613 Azerbaijanis were brutally massacred and murdered by Armenian troops. Over 250 of them were infants, children, women, and elderly people.
This sounds like quite an atrocity. I'm wondering, where was and is the international community?
So once this massacre took place, and suddenly we saw all the footage from the areas, from the fields where mutilated bodies and of those victims were laying. So it's very unfortunate that the Armenian troops not only killed and murdered the civilians, they also did some totally morally unacceptable things on the bodies of these victims, mutilating them, gouging out eyes, etc. So unspeakable violence. So we saw all those footage on our screens and TV. And
we didn't
course,
see them here in the United States, though.
Some international media outlets, including Washington Post and New York Times, Los Angeles Times, even Boston Globe and others, they reported about this violence pretty clearly. And also Human Rights Watch issued a statement saying that it's the most brutal, the largest massacre in this conflict, and putting direct responsibility for it with Armenian troops. International community's outrage was not enough. So I think in the face of such horrific atrocities, the international community should be more outspoken so that they do not repeat again. Otherwise, we will see them more and more happening in other places of the world.
Obviously, massacres, genocide, these kinds of conflicts need to be resolved everywhere in the world. We need to remember them and not have them happen again. So we're talking about something that's still ongoing. What is Armenia's position on this massacre?
Actually, Armenians do not completely deny this responsibility for the massacre. Even the former president of Armenia, who was president of the country between 2008 and 2018 for 10 years, he gave an interview to a British Caucasus expert, Tom DeVal, who later published a book on this conflict called Black Garden. In this interview, the president of Armenia actually admitted the responsibility for this massacre.
That's a step in the right direction.
What he said was pretty striking. He said, before Khojaly, Azerbaijani thought that they were joking with us. They thought that Armenians would not raise their hands to the civilian population. We had to break that stereotype, and that's what happened. This is the words by the president of Armenia. So actually saying that in order to prove them wrong, we marched in and slaughtered these civilians, just to teach Azerbaijanis a lesson.
That's unfortunate.
And the most unfortunate is that all perpetrators of this crime are at large. They enjoy great life in Armenia and beyond, and Armenian government has done nothing to bring them to justice.
Do they plan to?
I don't think so, especially as the situation looks in Armenia now. So this is very unfortunate, and especially after this statement by their own president, there is still a lot of denialism we see as far as the Khojaly massacre is concerned. So, but this is a very unfortunate thing, because the more you deny your responsibility for these atrocities, the more wrong message you send out to the rest of the world that you're not ready to deal with your history. At the same time, you see so many atrocities occurring in different parts of the world, and this is all the wrong message to all those perpetrators of other crimes in other parts of the world. And we don't want our world to continue on this path. We want our world to go in the right direction.
There's so many different issues to explore regarding this area of the world, and we'll talk more with Nasimi Aghayev, Consul General of Azerbaijan to the Western United States, when we return in a moment.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Perlman continues with further discussion. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
And so the question really boils down to, what is the right direction?
The one thing that we need to do is to speak about these atrocities more and more widely, because the more the world learns about them, the more they will be sensitive about when it happens again in other places. So that's what we've been doing as Azerbaijan, especially since 2008. We launched a campaign called Justice for Khojaly, spearheaded by Ms. Leyla Aliyeva, who is vice president of the Heydar Aliyev Foundation, which has done a tremendous amount of work to convey the truth about Khojaly to the international audience. And as a result, over 10 countries of the world have recognized and condemned the Khojaly genocide. Also, a lot of work has been done in the United States. 23 states in America and the United States have passed resolutions and issued proclamations at the governor's level condemning this massacre, this atrocity. And also 2 books have been published by American authors over the last few years on this subject. Also many articles in the Western media outlets have been published drawing attention to what's happened in 1992, in February 1992 in Khojaly. This is pretty important in terms of delivering the truth to the wider audience, also American audience. One particular step I would mention is the, I think, very successful film made actually in Los Angeles a few years ago called Running from Darkness, by American filmmakers who traveled to the region and talked to the survivors of this massacre, and actually then made a great film out of it. And this was presented at the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Museum of Tolerance here in Los Angeles. The international community's position on this conflict, on the occupation of Azerbaijan's lands, is quite clear. The world has condemned this occupation. When it took place in 1993, the United Nations Security Council passed 4 legally binding resolutions condemning this occupation and ethnic cleansing, demanding the withdrawal of all Armenian troops from Azerbaijan's territories. So the international law is on Azerbaijan's side, on the side of justice, that this is no longer a world where you can pursue a kind of jungle law, that you just go over other people's country and territory and invade and occupy it. There are rules, like the international legal norms, that you have to abide by. Unfortunately, Armenia has defied all these resolutions, and they have stayed on paper. They have not been enforced. That's why all these Azerbaijani IDPs, as well as the refugees from Armenia, over 250,000 Azerbaijanis were expelled from Armenia proper. So altogether, over 1 million Azerbaijanis have become refugees, IDPs, displaced from their own homes and lands. This catastrophe took place, and all these people, they yearn to go back to their lands and homes.
Is a resolution on this conflict possible?
Oh, definitely. Azerbaijanis and Armenians, they lived peacefully together for centuries. In that region, specifically Karabakh region, but also in Baku and other major towns. Still today, despite this bloody occupation of Azerbaijani lands, 20,000 Armenians still live in Baku and other major towns peacefully, without any problems, as many other ethnicities and religions continue to peacefully coexist in Azerbaijan. Christians of different denominations, a large Jewish community, Zoroastrians, Baha'is, Krishnas, all those different peoples and cultures coexisting peacefully, respecting each other, faith, traditions. So Azerbaijan, in that regard, is a model of interfaith, intercultural harmony and acceptance. So I think, yes, that's definitely, peace is possible. In fact, a few months ago, we hosted here a delegation of survivors of this massacre, Khojaly massacre, as well as the wider occupation of the Karabakh region from that region. Survivors came here, and the Nessa synagogue, which is one of the largest Iranian, Persian, Jewish synagogues in the world, hosted a well-attended event with this delegation. And they shared their stories, very painful stories, but everyone ended with one strong message, that we want peace and reconciliation. Despite all these tragedies that Azerbaijani people went through, we're looking forward to the peaceful future in the region, when we'll be able to live together with the Armenians again in peace. But for that to happen, Azerbaijan's territorial integrity should be restored, because 20% of Azerbaijan's lands are under still military occupation by Armenia. internationally condemned illegal military occupation, and it's continuing. Unfortunately, we see, even with this new government in Armenia, a kind of intransigence on the part of the Armenian government, not a constructive approach to these negotiations. There were principles called moderate principles suggested by the OSCE that actually are very reasonable. It suggests that the Armenian troops are withdrawn from the occupied areas, the IDPs return to their former place of residence, and then confidence-building measures are being launched, and then afterward the status of this region can be determined. So step-by-step approach. Azerbaijan accepted these proposals, but it was rejected by Armenia.
And we know that here in Los Angeles area of Southern California is the largest Armenian population outside of Armenia.
You're right. There is a large Armenian community in California. What also exacerbates the situation, I must say, is the Armenian special interest lobby in the United States and in some countries, who seem not to be interested in the resolution of this conflict, because this is the lobby structures that actually are surviving with a couple of issues that they can use to unite their base, and Karabakh issue is one of them. Take an example of this organization called Armenian National Committee of America, constantly working against peace in Congress and in other circles among the states, to make sure that the peace is not achievable. Of course, Armenian community does not only consist of these radicals. There are many righteous people here who understand in the community that Armenia cannot survive as a free and independent nation with this kind of conflict on the ground. There should be a reconciliation. There should be a resolution. And these Armenians, clever, smart Armenians, they understand it. Unfortunately, whenever they try to speak about it, they are labeled by those radicals as traitors of the cause, the national cause, which is, again, creating another obstacle for the resolution. But it's extremely harmful for the future of Armenia. Armenia today is the poorest country in the entire South Caucasus region. The poverty level is around 30 to 40%, whereas Azerbaijan has gone this transformation you mentioned. 2001, the poverty level in Azerbaijan was 50%, according to World Bank. Today it's under 5%.
Azerbaijan is concerned about the occupation of their lands. What has happened since that time?
We see today a large cultural cleansing that has been taking place. Not only ethnic cleansing, but an ethnic cleansing has been now followed by cultural cleansing, meaning erasing all traces of Azerbaijani presence in Karabakh region. As if Azerbaijan has never lived in these areas. It's destruction of mosques, Azerbaijani mosques, destruction of our graveyards, all those different religious, cultural structures that belong to Azerbaijani heritage in these occupied areas. We've seen a mosque turned into a pig shed. This was a famous case of Juma Mosque in the city called Agdam. That's another story. Agdam was a well-populated city. 50,000 Azerbaijanis were living in Agdam, and it's been now turned into a ghost town. Every single building has been destroyed in this city after the occupation, and their materials have been used for the construction of Armenian settlements around the city, at that city. So there are many cases of such as evidencing the cultural destruction, cultural cleansing, and which is actually, I think, pretty tragic. So over 4,500 objects belonging to Azerbaijani cultural heritage, both in the occupied areas and on the territory of the Republic of Armenia, have been either destroyed completely or desecrated. Like take, for instance, the mosques in Yerevan, the capital of Armenia. You know, a large portion, almost 50% of Yerevan's population were Azerbaijanis, ethnic Azerbaijan. That's why there were lots of mosques just in Yerevan alone, over 60 of them, only one remains. One single mosque remains in Yerevan, and it's called Blue Mosque, but Armenians now call it Iranian or Persian Mosque. So even not mentioning that it belongs to Azerbaijani cultural heritage, and other mosques have been erased from the face of the earth. One famous case was the Demirbalag Mosque in Yerevan, which was bulldozed by Armenian forces in 1990, and there's been well evidenced in that region. So this destruction, attacks against culture are continuing to this day. And the other problem is that we see, unfortunately, a wide range of radicalization in present-day Armenia. Today, Armenia is one of the very few mono-ethnic nations in the world. 99% of Armenia's populations are Armenians.
So they haven't had a lot of refugees or immigrants from around the region?
They have Armenian refugees from other countries, but they're all Armenians, 99%. But before the occupation, before the conflict, a large portion of Armenia's population were Azerbaijanis. 250,000 of them were expelled. So, and of course, many Kurds were expelled as well. It had a 5,000 Jewish population. Only maybe 100 of them have remained. So Armenia has lost, because of its policies, a large portion of its non-Armenian population. It's now become a mono-ethnic nation. One of the very unique cases in the entire world. But so we see that not only there is a strong Azerbaijanophobia, let's put it this way, a spread of hatred against Azerbaijanis, but also against other minorities. We've seen many cases of anti-Semitism now in Armenia within the last 2 decades. Even the Anti-Defamation League did a survey of anti-Semitism in many different countries, and according to their survey, the level of anti-Semitism in Armenia is 58%.
That's high.
Pretty high, which makes Armenia the third most anti-Semitic nation in the entire world outside of Middle East and North Africa.
To hear that.
And the number 2 in the entire European region. Pew Research did another study, and the survey, their result was that 38% of those who were asked did not want to see Jews as fellow citizens. So this is very unfortunate. This is a result of a constant spread of hatred and intolerance by government structures in Armenia, that these feelings, these negative attitudes are being enforced. So it's also not a coincidence that in the middle of Yerevan, the center of Yerevan, they erected a statue of a former Nazi collaborator, Armenian Nazi collaborator called Garegi Nijde. So this guy actually was one of the generals, Armenian generals, leading the Armenian Legion during the World War II on the German side as part of the Wehrmacht, and participating in rounding up Jews and others, helping actually Adolf Hitler. This guy is being glorified in Armenia as a national hero. Instead of condemning what he did, condemning how helped Hitler execute the Holocaust and other atrocities, and the Armenian government has erected a huge statue of this Nazi collaborator, of Garegi Nijde, in the center of Yerevan.
At the beginning of the program, I indicated that I saw a transformation of Azerbaijan when I visited it under the Soviet Union, then again many years later as an independent country. What transformation can I expect on my next visit?
This transformation is ongoing. You're right, from a poor, war-torn, unstable country to the largest economy in the region and a prosperous country that has a very smart leadership who knows what's best for the country and for our people. Under the leadership of President Ilham Aliyev, Azerbaijan has become truly an island of stability, an island of prosperity in an otherwise difficult and challenging region. That's why the hopes of Azerbaijanis for the just and the peaceful resolution of this conflict within the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan in the nearest future are high, and I think we will get there.
Thank you so very much for sharing with us what is going on in this very unique area of the world. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you very much. Great to be on your show.
I have been speaking with Nasimi Aghayev, Consul General of Azerbaijan to the Western United States and Senior Representative for Azerbaijan to 13 U.S. states. I'm Nancy Perlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Perlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.